Welcome to Uxbridge Beat, the podcast where we feature the who's who of Uxbridge, Ontario. My name is Scott Camsell.
And I am Jennifer Nephew Camsell, and today we are happy to take you on a drive with Adam Ruppel.
Adam was born and raised in Uxbridge and is now making his mark in the automotive world with his performance driving and car extravaganza weekend, Drive Festival.
Porsche, Ferrari, McLaren, Lamborghini, they're just some of the big names featured at this annual weekend event happening this year, September 9th through 11th. And Adam takes us on the test track to explain the ins and the outs of performance driving and car appreciation.
Well, he didn't really take us on the test track, but he did make us want to experience this incredible event.
So, regardless if you're a car aficionado or just car curious, we hope you enjoy our chat with Adam as we learn about Drive Festival and what puts the beat into his engine revving heart. Adam, thank you for joining us on Uxbridge Beat. We're so glad you're here with us today. Tell us a little bit about your Uxbridge background. Before we get into all the professional stuff, tell us a little bit about you.
I grew up in Uxbridge, and actually Scott used to live down the street from me, and we hung out quite a bit growing up. Always enjoyed the outdoors and cycling, and it was a lot smaller when we grew up, as you remember, probably about a third the size it is today, but it still has that small town feel, so I've always stayed in Uxbridge and been part of it. Been part of the mountain bike trails as well. Grew up here mountain biking and enjoyed cycling, road cycling, and that sort of thing, so great place to grow up.
And then you moved your cycling into your professional passion?
Yeah, well, I kind of fell into it. Nobody would hire me. But
what were you trying to do? What would hire you to do what?
Actually, what I was trying to do was become a professional bike racer. And I was at the cusp of maybe making it professionally. I made some money doing it, but really wasn't able to sustain myself. And my friend Iceman, Eric Gorschel, you probably know Eric, started organizing cycling events, and I was working in a bike shop, and I decided to organize my first mountain bike event, kind of to support the cycling habit and the racing program that I was doing. So I organized my first event. Remember, I ran it for about a $3,000 budget, and it brought in more than that. I was very excited. Ran it at Durham Forest. I think I was the first person ever to run a mountain bike race at Durham Forest, and I think I paid my brother with cycling shorts and a cycling shirt. And we ran our first event, had 250 riders, and it was a success, and I continued that. That was back in 1994, and I continued that and built it into a company called Chico Racing. And at its peak, we were doing about 10,000 participant visits a year between two 24-hour races, Crank the Shield stage race, and we were running all of the Ontario Cup mountain bike races. We also kind of helped build the sport, like a lot of people like Emily Batty and Haley Smith, both Olympians from Uxbridge, started racing in our Chico Racing mountain bike events.
That's a great feather in your cap. That's fantastic.
Yeah, so it was great. Like Emily Batty came to my first event with her family, and she was like 10 years old. And then the next year she started racing bikes, and she started beating some 19-year-old guys. So you saw that she had talent, and we've seen a number of talented people both make the Olympic team out of events that Sean and I were able to produce over the years. Sean's still doing a lot of mountain bike events. I just do one, which is the 24-hour, so summer solstice over at Albion Hills Conservation Area.
And Chico is specific to mountain bike racing, or do you do any road racing or any obstacle course work?
Actually, with the Chico Racing, the segue from Chico Racing is I always kept it just as a mountain bike brand. Even though I was a road racer, I never really felt that organizing those events had that inclusiveness and bringing kids out and bringing families together that I really liked from mountain biking. So I really kept the Chico Racing as a mountain bike brand. And from that, when I saw it sort of about 2008, 2009, the numbers started to dwindle a little bit with the economy going down. And I was asking myself, I remember pounding a steak, and the steak, it was pouring rain, and I was at one of the races and I was pounding the steak, and the steak started to just come apart, and it was pouring rain, and I had a raincoat, and I was about to be 40 years old, and I had done it for 14 years as a full-time living, and I was asking myself, is there something else I could do besides just pounding steaks and running these mountain bike events? Not that there's anything wrong with it. Some of them were pretty big and it was fun, but I looked at these American companies bringing obstacle racing up into Canada a couple years later, and then I jumped onto that game, and that was a lot bigger than the Chico Racing business ever was for me. So it sort of allowed me to have bigger marketing budgets. I had 7 people working for me at one time, full time, and we had like a crew of 15 people and we were running them across Canada. So that was pretty exciting because we built that company from top of my garage. First year we did about 600,000 in revenue. We did about 9,000 participants, and by the third year we were doing 65,000 participants between 6 events, and we did about 4 million in sales. So it was a pretty big explosion. We hit the timing perfectly for the Canadian marketplace, and we also were able to sort of exceed some of the American companies. We went head to head against like the Tough Mudders and the Spartan races and Warrior Dashes and those kinds of events that were coming up into Canada. And we were really the first Canadian obstacle racing business that took it seriously and put quite a bit of money into the events. And we also put a lot of money into marketing. And interestingly, it was the start of like Facebook marketing, like 2012, when not many people were doing it and you could blow up. Like this thing was blown up because of Facebook marketing. Instagram wasn't even really that much of a thing back then, but it was Facebook, and we put a lot of money into Facebook and marketing and created those little ads, desktop ads and stuff like that, kind of pictures. We hired models for our first event, and we blew it up that way because it was something to grab people's imagination of getting dirty and getting to nature and having an adventure. And we built the obstacle races to be inclusive for women as well. We realized that women were going to support this more by bringing groups of people in, and it kind of took off.
When you say you brought more women in, but you mentioned bikers that are females doing really well, but would you still say with obstacle courses it was more of a, I don't know, unisex type crowd?
Yeah, actually, so interesting. At mountain biking, we've never been able to kind of go over 20% female attendees for whatever reason. But with the Mud Hero, we were about 65% female doing the event, 60 to 65% women. So we went with more of a fun vibe and an inclusive vibe for that, where the Tough Mudders and even the Spartan races at the time were showing these muscle guys that were climbing up over things and really aggressive sort of content. I remember the Tough Mudder video showed people being pulled off the course on stretcher and getting electrocuted and stuff like that. That's how they started their marketing back then. And so we said, let's go opposite to that and let's be more fun and inclusive. And we're going to put you through a challenge, but we're not going to send you home in a stretcher.
Okay, so you talk about Facebook marketing, and that's where I really heard about you now doing Drive Festival, was through one of your Facebook ads. So tell us a bit about Drive Festival.
That started actually, I got into performance driving a long time ago, back in 2004.
Help me out. Performance driving is?
Where you buy a sports car or a race car and you take it to the track. And then
your dad did that, right? Didn't he?
Yeah, I think you did once. Yeah.
But you have to have your own car?
Usually, but there is ways, like right now, if I have the budget, I'd rather if I join a race, I'd rather not take my race car, which I think I'm getting rid of it, but I'd rather rent a seat in a race car because I just don't like the wrenching and all the things around that. But basically, it's like people buy a Porsche, let's say, and they're like, well, I enjoy driving the car, but you can't really figure out the limits of the car by having it on the street.
I see.
Not safely. And certainly not legally, and certainly not with your license going to be intact or your insurance. So what happens is we have these performance driving days, and more experienced drivers will sit in the passenger seat and take you around the racetrack and teach you about performance driving. There are braking points, the vision, everything from entry, apex, exit, throttle management of the steering and everything else, and give you kind of the synopsis of driving around a racetrack, being able to dance with the car, really feel what the car is doing and feel it in the seat of your pants and understand where your traction's coming from, how to get traction. People may not know, but when you're going down a hill and you want to go around a corner, to get more traction in the car, you have to actually lean more on the throttle. It sounds counterintuitive, but it helps flatten the car out because you're front weighting the front of the car. But anyways, these are all intricacies of performance driving, but you learn it over years and you get to drive these performance cars on racetracks. And we have a great racetrack, Canadian Tire Motorsport Park, and I've probably spent 400 days driving the Grand Prix track and maybe 50 days driving their smaller draft development track. And I got into that And 2018, somebody from FAF, where I purchased some of my cars, I had purchased a Porsche from them. One of the higher ups at FAF's contacted me and said, you run events. Would you be interested in running a car event? And I thought to myself, yeah, I'm kind of at the end of doing this obstacle running thing and wanted to try something even bigger and more challenging. So I thought, give this a go. And I ended up sort of benchmarking other automotive events around North America and Europe and going out and checking out these car events. And then it struck me kind of what I'm always looking for when I'm producing an event is what is missing in the marketplace and what can I provide that is important to the event, but nobody else can provide it.
So what makes your event stand out?
What makes it stand out in Canada is that we're actually a fully dynamic event. So an experiential event rather than your typical car show. You've probably been to the Toronto Auto Show, great show, but you go and you look at the cars and they're sitting in a building and you see a Bugatti, but it's sitting there. Nobody's starting it up. It's just sitting there behind ropes. And then you go check out the manufacturer cars and you might be able to open the door and hop in it and look at the infotainment system and go, wow, this is really cool. Well, our event's different in that the owners of these cars, plus some of the manufacturers, are bringing out these high performance cars. Yesterday, one of the owners of a Bugatti Chiron, the new one, Bugatti, is bringing it to the event and he's going to drive it in front of the public on our Dream Car Speed Run. So it's a 2-kilometer run and we've got cameras set up and Jumbotrons so people can actually hear, see, and feel, plus get up close to these cars in a way that you couldn't on the street or at a typical car show. The other thing that's different is we actually have a dynamic test track, performance drivers where you can go in the passenger seat and go around an autocross so you can actually feel what it feels like to go around a car and be at the edge of traction in a performance car and really get a great feel for it as a passenger safely. And then we also have 3 test tracks, the manufacturer test track limited to like 80 kilometers an hour. We have an off-road test track where you can test drive Jeeps and the new Nissan Frontier. And we're going to have some Chevy vehicles as well and some Hyundai vehicles on the off-road track. So you can actually test them in a full off-road and test the all-wheel drive and four-wheel drive. And then we have a performance test track where we have cars from Hyundai and Kia to Porsche on that track. And for VIPs, we also have McLarens, but we also have a supercar rental company there. So you can actually rent yourself laps and drive a Ferrari or a Lamborghini or a McLaren or a Porsche with a driving instructor. So you can get a couple laps in on that. And then we also have like the car club displays and you sort of a whole kids area and food and expo. So you can get right up close with race cars, vintage cars, exotic cars, and everything under the sun for automotive.
Common question we get at Okamikai Martial Arts and Fitness is, what age can my child start karate?
And the answer is that we have children as young as 3 years old training with us. Austin is one of our amazing students, and he told us some of his favorite things about our program.
Do lots of stuff like karate, like weight falls, kicks, and blocks, and punches. I can do anything.
Austin can do anything, and we are excited to help bring out his potential and your child's too.
We use martial arts as a tool to help your child build confidence, focus, self-discipline, and respect for others.
Contact us at Okamikai Martial Arts and Fitness to get your child started today.
Mom, wake up, it's karate day!
I used to be a Jeep guy, so I used to drive Jeeps, and I liked off-roading when I could, and now I'm driving a Nissan Rogue. So now you're talking about, you could drive a Lamborghini, you could drive a Ferrari, and now, gotta be honest, I'm gonna be a little intimidated by that. Should I be?
Actually, most people are super nervous, and they're the people, I'm actually a driving instructor as well on the racetrack now. So I sit passenger, and I was helping out with Toyota. I do Ferrari days, and I do actually help out with the rental cars. So I sit passenger in those. So we just manage it. Probably only 2% of the public get behind the wheel, and I'm like, slow down. Most of them, I'm holding on their steering wheel, and I'm like, a little more throttle, okay, little bit of brake, okay, throttle, more throttle. Most people are really intimidated by the cars, and they feel like they're going at 9/10, but we know generally most people the first time behind the wheel of these cars, they're going about 5/10, but they're still getting a great experience. And then you build up from there.
So driving school, I remember in high school, they said, okay,
Right.
we're going to do defensive driving. And
Right.
it sounds like what you're doing is offensive driving, a little bit more aggressive.
Actually, it's in a certain way, it's still very defensive, because what you're realizing, and this is where bad driving happens, is that people that are like on off the throttle or jerky with the steering wheel or jerky with any of the inputs, they're the ones that go really slow, but they scare the heck out of me. Whether they're even in an off-road vehicle going 10 kilometers an hour. I was working at a Toyota event on our off-road track because we were testing it out with all the new Toyotas. And there was a gentleman in one of the cars, and he was like on off the throttle. We were going slow, but I was almost sick to my stomach because he was just so brutal with his inputs. He was not dancing with the car. And when you actually go with a performance driver, you may hear the squealing wheels, but you generally don't see a lot of, unless it's rally car driving or it's on ice, which I also do, you don't see a lot of like quick movements, and you don't feel a lot of like, you will feel like they're firm on the brake, and you'll feel when they are firm on the throttle, but it's not done in such a way that the car gets really upset. So it's not jerky.
So this sounds like a really extreme sport type thing, but it's one of those things where the sounds of things is that if you're a driver, you'd almost want to learn how to do this to make you a better driver for when you're off the track and when you're on the regular road.
Exactly. You become a better defensive driver, and you become more aware of your surroundings. So you've got to look for flag people. You've got to have an understanding of the other cars that are coming up, whether they want to pass you or you pass them. And then if you get into racing, and I'm only racing at a fairly low level on go-karts and cars, then it's another even step up. So it's a whole other ballpark. And really, in the grand scheme of things, I'm an intermediate person, but I could take people with their Porsches or their Ferraris on the Grand Prix track or the driver development track and sort of manage them and get them around the track and feeling good and not putting their car in danger.
Have you had to kick a driver out and you just
Yeah.
set it up? Yeah?
Oh yeah. Yeah, it happened actually at one of the supercar rental days, and it was just the individual wouldn't listen. And a lot of people have really bad habits when they're driving a car, like how they hold the steering wheel. A lot of people hold the steering wheel right at the bottom with one hand, and it's like you can feel they're just jerky, like driving on the road. Or even when they're on the racetrack, their hand goes like this, and they're trying to. So at 12 and 6, and your hand should be at 3 and 9. So it's like these guys aren't, or people, sorry, all people, guys or girls, some of them don't listen, and they have bad habits, and they don't want to change. And a lot of people sit way too far back from the steering wheel too, so their arms are out straight, and it's like you can only turn so much. You're not a hip hop star in this Ferrari, you know, you're not like leaning way back. You've got to actually get close to the steering wheel. And if you look at Formula One drivers, they fit in a box, like everything is tight so that they can manage that steering wheel and turn smoothly. You'd have the same challenges in martial arts, for people that are jerky, and you can tell probably the difference between a beginner and an intermediate and an advanced by how comfortable they are and how everything it becomes.
That's a good analogy. That's a really good analogy, because you're right. As soon as you said that, it's like, oh yeah, I can totally see. A couple of people are right in my head right now going, yeah, he's jerky, and then this guy he's a little bit more relaxed, and I can see where that would definitely come in handy. Yeah.
But ultimately, if you have to kick somebody out, it's because they're not listening and they're putting their own safety into jeopardy and the safety of the car.
Exactly. And some people just don't like it, and that's fine. I'm sure you find some people with martial arts,
everybody loves martial arts. We're not.
Really?
Yeah, everybody loves martial arts.
Most people really like performance driving, and most people really love doing the off-road stuff because they're amazed, especially like in one of the Jeeps. You've done some of that. And our off-road course at Drive Festival is, there's one challenging section in it for some of the cars that are more capable of it, but the other one is more like an extreme country road drive. So
Drive Festival happens once a year or more than once a year?
Well, only once a year, thankfully. September 9th to 11th, and we're expecting around 30,000 attendees this year for it. So,
how did the pandemic change things for you?
It was a super challenge, just like it was for your business. 2020 was a disaster. Everything was shut down. And it was very confusing because I had pre-sold some of my 24-hour mountain bike race, and it was confusing how to deal with customers when you had that many. It was basically sold out for my 24-hour event, and getting questions. And a lot of people in the event business thought they could run their event just by pushing it forward to the end into fall. But I kind of had a idea that this was going to be with us a little bit longer. 2021, we were one of the few events, Drive Festival, we launched it, and I actually had my 24-hour event 2 weeks before it as well. So I probably had the most challenging year in 2021, but I was able to pull off 2 events. They both ran quite successfully, and Drive Festival certainly had a good launch year, but man, was it ever stressful. It was super stressful because we didn't even get our partners or sponsors on board until like the month leading up to the event. Yeah, it was a super stressful pandemic, as it was for many people. I feel for the restaurant businesses and the fitness industry and event industry was right in that realm. But we did get some government support as well, so some grants that helped us, and we launched it. It was successful. We had one of the largest events outside of a few music festivals in Ontario last year, and we're looking at sort of building on that success again this year. We've got about 3 times the support going into this year. So
have you taken your dad driving?
No, he doesn't. He's not a performance driver. He has a 2009 Caravan, and we call it the Grandpa Raccoon's van. If you want to feel low, take that minivan out for a drive because it just clunks along. It smells. He loads it with garbage and gear, so he doesn't care about cars anymore. I guess that's the thing when you're 82. He doesn't care what he drives. That's good.
But he's not looking for the thrill of sitting shotgun with his kid.
I took him in my Porsche sometimes, but he has a hard time now getting out of it because it's so low, right? He's 82. He's still strong, but he's not.
Doesn't care what he drives now because he's 82. Didn't he drive a Gremlin?
Yeah, actually, we had a Gremlin.
Yeah.
Actually, he never really cared what he drove.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but he did have some cool cars when he was younger. He had an MGA and an MGB. Maybe at the time when he met my mother. After that, we did have a sports car, like a little MG, kind of growing up. But your dad's into cars. Now, I remember I bought my S2000.
We still talk about you. We still talk about you and your S2000.
Yeah, so I had the first S2000 in Uxbridge, and then it wasn't like 3 weeks later, and your dad bought one. And I was like, great. Now there's 2 of them in town?
Yeah, you're not a unique car collector.
Except your dad still has his.
Yeah. They're 3 years away from being a classic.
Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, a great car actually, and I only ended up keeping it for about 2.5 years, but I kind of regret selling that car actually. That was a really cool car.
So your brother was paid off with shorts for one of your events.
Yeah, now I pay him more.
Yeah, is he?
He gets a water bottle now.
Event business now. Yeah,
he's got his own event business.
Oh yes, he took a lot of the events that I couldn't produce anymore, so he kind of, how would I say this in a nice way? He took a lot of the mountain bike burden in Ontario by running a lot of mountain bike events. So he went all in, and he pretty much does mountain bike events predominantly. But he does a few other things on the side. He has a Polar Rush, so an obstacle run that I think he's relaunching this year. So it's been his prominent way to make a living as well. So he's done events, and he works for me on some events. I actually helped him out on Sault Ste. Marie on the weekend where our camp is. I helped him out with this 3-day mountain bike stage race. So I was working that for him. It's all good.
So are you pretty much strictly focused on Drive Festival now, or?
Yeah.
Okay. So,
yeah, and then I'll have my 24-hour event again next year. So that's my other thing. I just 2 events to do a year, and I'd rather do 2 events that are of scale and quality rather than run tons of events. And I don't have a lot of staff either. So
you're still hitting spikes or steaks? Sorry? You're still pounding steaks?
A little bit, but not that much. I actually hire contractors on the weekend, so I'll still pound a few steaks, but I don't mind it pounding steaks if it's not every weekend. And it's giving me, the nice thing about Drive Festival is I get to work with like a real marketing budget. I'm working with like car collectors, and I get to sometimes even drive some of these really cool cars that you see at my show. Sometimes the owners say, hey, would you like to drive this? Like a 1956 Mercedes Gullwing. When am I going to get a chance to drive something like that? But I did, and took him out to coffee in his Gullwing Mercedes, and that's a pretty special car.
So a lot of people talk about, I've got a bucket list. I want to go and drive this car.
Right.
What's on your bucket list for driving now? What's the one car where you say, I'd really like to drive that and I've never had the chance? Or is there one?
Actually, I got to drive in a Ferrari F40 last year. And the owner didn't say, hey, would you drive it? I don't know, I would have driven it because it's a fairly particular car, and it's worth $2.5 million. I did drive the Gullwing. That's might have been my bucket list car, actually. It was, we're talking about a car actually that Trudeau drove once, and Jacqueline Onassis was in, and my friend drove Lewis Hamilton to the F1 Grand Prix, one of the parties, after parties or something, in that Gullwing, the same Gullwing that I drove, the 1956 Mercedes Gullwing. And I've been loaned McLarens and driven a number of Ferraris on the racetrack and that sort of thing. So I don't know that I have a car. There's maybe a car that I'd like to own, which would be like probably a Porsche GT4 RS, but I probably will never get on the list for it, but that might be a car I'd like to own. But it's not necessary. I mean, I'm kind of living the car dream in that I'm assembling all these amazing cars, and some of them worth millions of dollars coming to the show. So it kind of takes care of that itch, if you will.
If you had consumers who are coming to the show and know very little about cars and want to just get their feet wet into the experience, whether as a driver or as a passenger, what would be the first step for very inexperienced car or new car aficionados?
Well, I mean, I think that it's a great place to come just to check out the wide variety of vehicles and sort of get a sense of it. The test tracks are also a good opportunity. Manufacturer test track. If you've never tried an electric car, we're gonna have like the new Hyundai Ioniq there. We're gonna have a Kia EV6. Those are really hot electric cars, and you're gonna be able to go through like our electric car pavilion. Or if you're like into pickup trucks, but you've never driven one off-road, maybe you're gonna head on over to the off-road track. Or if it's your bucket list to drive a Lamborghini or a Ferrari, then you can buy some laps for a couple $100. You can scratch that itch and check it off the bucket list and be part of our event and come check it out and get up and talk to some of those owners of different cars. We're gonna have about 15 different car clubs at the event as well, and they're bringing out cars to showcase, and those owners love talking about the cars. So you can get a sense of what might be your dream car or what inspires you about automobiles. And for some, it's actually the new technology and trying to save the environment by driving an electric car. Totally see that. And for others, it's getting to hear like a 1972 McLaren K&M race car that we have at the event, startup, with 900 horsepower. It only weighs 1,800 pounds. I wouldn't drive that. That scares me.
So something there. You've got an actual car.
I've got something that scares me, yes.
Yeah.
And
Adam's gonna need a coach in the driver's seat. So
I wouldn't drive that off the get-go. It's just too much car for me.
So you have unique machines that are at this event. Are there unique people? Is there anybody where you'd go, oh, this person's coming, you should go and talk to them? So
Elvis Stoico's coming.
Okay.
So he's driving one of the cars in the Dream Car Speed Run. A number of local celebrities in automotive community, that sort of thing, are coming out to the event. But you're going to be able to get right up and close and speak to those people that have experience with those brands and those cars and that sort of thing. A lot of people come from the community, come from motorsport and also the automotive industry, and from the car clubs who are people that, a lot of people have these cars, but they just want to show them. They don't want to drive them up the Dream Car Speed Run because they're not performance drivers, and that's totally fine as well. If you really want a chance to test drive more cars, I would come on the Friday, because the Saturday gets pretty jammed as well as the Sunday, but the Friday's fairly.
And that's all day?
Friday from 11 a.m. to 6 p.m., Saturday 10 a.m. to 6 p.m., and Sunday 10 a.m. to 5 p.m.
I'm thinking because that's the weekend right after Labor Day weekend, right?
Right.
So that's when the Uxbridge Fair is on.
Oh, no.
So, no, it's okay, because you just said you can go during the day on Friday. Now you can go to the tractor pull Friday night. Now you can go back on Saturday and drive some cars, then watch people smash them up at the Demo Derby.
Exactly.
It's a perfect weekend.
It's a perfect weekend.
Yeah, exactly. But we're not sending any of those Dream Car Speed Run people to the Demolition Derby.
No,
with their cars.
No.
Probably best.
Yeah.
How do we find out more information about Drive Festival?
DriveFestival.com, or visit us in Instagram at drive_festival, and just check out those Facebook and Instagram ads that we're going to have, and you're going to hear lots about it. Get your tickets early.
Adam, this sounds like a great event. You got me really seriously thinking about going, and what was that? Scratch that itch for a couple $100 bucks?
I'm feeling itchy.
Yeah, I'm feeling a little itchy. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Come to Drive Festival, Canada's largest new outdoor event for auto enthusiasts at Canadian Tire Motorsport Park. Get up close to the world's most exciting cars like Porsche, Ferrari, McLaren, Lamborghini, and Pagani. Driven at speed on the Dream Car Speed Run. Engage directly with manufacturers and take a test drive on one of our off-road and performance test tracks. It's 3 days of automotive nirvana. Canadian Tire Motorsport Park. Get tickets at drivefestival.com.
Cars are such a personal thing. Is there any car that you can think of in your memory that just sort of has a special place in your heart?
Yeah, a Saab 900 saved my life. When I was 17 years old, I was in a massive car accident. And that's the car my dad had. I was driving, and the police officer who helped me in the accident said that had I not been driving a Saab or a Volvo, I would have been killed instantly. So my dad bought another one to, help protect my life, which was a good thing because I ended up being T-boned in the second one as well and walked away injury-free. So a safe car is a good car. What about you?
Most of the cars I can think of, my first car was a Chevy Corsica. So my mom had given me some money to help buy that. But most of the cars that I can think of that really create fond memories were all owned by other people. I remember my grandmother had a Chevy Nova, a little green Chevy Nova. She also had an Oldsmobile 98, which was like a huge car. It was but the size of a limo. My dad had a Mercury Cougar. My uncle had a big van, like an A-Team type van. It had like a big picture of a yellow brick road on the side. He had done carpeting and everything. My parents had a yellow van, like a big gold thing. It's all coming back to me now.
Kids today are never going to know those big vans or those big station wagons like we used to have. We used to have the station wagons, I think you did too, where the back seat faced backwards. Dad had one that the two back seats also faced inside, like inwards, like a limo. Previous to that, we had a 1977 Pontiac Ventura that the front seat went forward when you braked. And so my car seat would be like hung over the front of the back of the seat in the front. And every time my mom would brake, you'd go forward in your car seat and come back. So now kids are so much safer than when we were little.
Car seats.
I had a car seat. Mine doubled as a high chair. It had a tray and everything, but it was a car seat.
See, and I remember my dad did have a station wagon, and all the seats would go down so that you'd have like all this playroom, I guess. Well, it was mostly so you could carry big stuff in the back of your station wagon. But for a kid, this was like, oh, no, I can lay down. I can fall asleep back here, which is literally what happened. I had actually porcupine quills in my hand from a camping trip one time, and I had them, and I just clutched onto them so tight. 3-hour drive home, and on the last 20 minutes, hand opened up, and we were pulling porcupine quills out of the back for months.
Well, probably better in a station wagon than in a really fancy car, because Dad's had a couple of fancy cars over the years too. And what about you? Do you have any itches to scratch to go drive some fancy cars at Drive Festival?
And this is one of the things where I feel like I'm sort of lacking in a certain area, is I never had that moment where I went, oh, I really want that car. But I remember we were in California. I was teaching one time and I saw a Bugatti for the first time, and I went, that's a really good looking car. I can see why people pay the money they do for these things. But at the same time, it's interesting. The cars that you and I are naming off as, this was a special car, or this is what gave me a fond memory. Station wagons, Chevys. I remember my cousin had an orange Volkswagen Beetle. These are all, what's considered to be a classic.
Well, maybe it's just because that's what our experience was. Maybe if we grew up with people who had Bugattis and Lamborghinis and Ferraris, those would be very special to us as well.
Yeah, I'm trying.
But we didn't.
Yeah, but we didn't. Dad, we didn't. No, he had a Nissan 240SX, and I remember he had got his. At one point, he was selling printing. He owned a printing company, and so his top sales guy, he ended up getting him a 240SX. He got a black one, and he loved it so much he ended up getting a red one for himself. And but that was his baby. Now he's got a Honda S2000, so he's it's not like he was lacking in the car department. But I'm 50. I'm talking about what cars my dad would own. But where am I? Where's my sports car? Well, we're not getting a Lamborghini, honey.
But there are people who really dig this stuff, super dig it. And Drive Festival is the place to go. If you love cars, if you want to experience cars just to see them, get in them, have these test drives, obviously Drive Festival is your place to go.
And maybe, because I know Adam's probably listening to this, a suggestion? Maybe you have the test drive of the big vans. You know, the big A-Team van or the big, not necessarily the A. Oh, that would be cool. There's my dream car. I want to drive the A-Team van.
The A-Team van or the Scooby-Doo mystery machine, maybe.
The Ghostbusters car.
Okay, now it's getting cool. So if you want to go drive some really cool cars that are likely not the Ghostbusters car or the Scooby-Doo mystery machine or the A-Team van.
Or Kit, Knight Rider.
Oh, that's a high crush car for me right there.
Yeah.
Not David Hasselhoff, the car. Truly, the car. So back to Drive Festival. Head on down to Drive Festival, September 9th through 11th, and you'll have a really cool weekend of all sorts of experiences. I'm looking forward to it. I'm going to head down, and I'll report back.
You know what? I think I'm also going to open this up on the socials. So let's say you listen to this episode. I'm going to post this on Facebook when we launch it. Tell us about your favorite car story.
Yeah, absolutely. Tell us the good stuff. Tell us the bad stuff. Your favorite car story, maybe a bad car accident, or maybe the coolest car you ever drove, or the fastest traffic ticket you've ever received. Ooh.
Just all excited about traffic ticket. Tell us about when you got in trouble.
Yeah, I like that stuff.
Yeah, so comment on Instagram, Facebook, and then tag us on Twitter too. But yeah, use our socials. I want to hear all about the stories.
Yeah, and then if you head down to Drive Festival, make sure you tell us about that too. Give us some firsthand experience on what your experience was. I'm sure Adam would love to hear your feedback, and hope to see you at Drive Festival.
September 9th to 11th. Thanks very much for listening. This has been a Camsel Broadcasting production. Contact us to start the engines on your next audio project.